Hey everyone, my name is Elio Narciso. I'm the co-founder and CEO at SkillStack. Welcome to the Revenue Engine Masters podcast. As you know, we dive deep into go-to-market, ops, marketing, and a lot of different cutting-edge ways in which companies and people are transforming how go-to-market is done today. My guest today is Cliff Simon. A friend, I would say, because we've been talking now for like a couple of years. He's the founder and CEO at Polaris. I find him absolutely like a pleasure to be with, and also a trailblazer in like revenue operations. Cliff, you pioneered like RevOps-as-a-Service model, basically. You were before Polaris the CRO at Carabinier Group, which was acquired by SBI Growth, and you scaled that company from like I think a couple of employees to 7-figure ARR in year one, and then like 5x, almost 5x in year two through a lot of like community-led go-to-market strategies. So really looking forward to the conversation. You have like almost 2 decades anchoring go-to-market teams across SaaS and enterprise software. And he is a sought after voice on RevOps. So
Gosh.
welcome to the podcast, Cliff.
Thanks,
Anything
Elio.
that you want to add?
I don't know, man. Like, I'm just a guy.
Well, welcome. I think my usual first question is like always like, how did we get here? No, so and you have had like a pretty unusual career arc, working at larger companies and then progressively exploring essentially the world of smaller companies and including like a 3 people startup. And so maybe and now of course like your own company. And so maybe take me through that um story about like how did we get here for you, running and starting Polaris.
Yeah, well, I think for me, like the beginning was really beneficial to understand how large enterprises worked, working for a Fortune 20. But I always wanted access and had the desire to do more. Right. I wanted to be able to put my finger on the strategic button and make things actually move within an org instead of just being the one to go and execute as an IC or as
Hmm.
a leader. So I went down the chain, and every time I was looking for access to more responsibility, more access to strategic conversations, and I just sort of, I mean, it was completely unintentional in the beginning, right? I was just looking
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
more, and then it became pretty intentional when I went to a team of three. So I knew what I was looking for at that moment in time.
So like is the wanting to own more of the relationship with customers or in general like the decision making process or everything?
The decision making process, the direction and focus of a firm and how that ebbs and flows, all of it, right? The strategic planning, the ideation. I wanted to be at the center of all of it.
Very good. And instead, in terms of like the technical skills, like you do like something um that RevOps and revenue touches everything, but it's a very like well-defined specific field. And so on the technical side of things, how did you get here?
I mean, I was never the most technical. I definitely come more from the strategy and go to market background.
Hmm.
And I did get into the weeds on it by, creating and delivering comp plans, territory assignments, setting up all of the different ways that we did, different flows and handoffs between our teams, doing QA and all kinds of testing and building out when we went from one of my old companies from Classic to Lightning, right? And we did that fairly early on. So dealing with all those bugs and working with my Salesforce team to go make sure that that was being executed appropriately across that. And, back then I think we were using Zora and, we had a phone system that we were implementing and then we, everything on the CS side of the house. So yeah, I got to get my hands in it pretty early on. I'm
And so
definitely not
now,
architect. No Apex over here.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, technical for me, it's also like a comp plan or like, territory mapping and all of that. To me, it's pretty technical. I mean, it's a different technical knowledge that doesn't maybe require engineering, but it's still, it requires you to go deep and in detail and like, factoring in multiple elements. And so, well, first I'm curious about Polaris. Why the name Polaris and where did that come from? And then what gap did you see in the market and made you say, okay, I need to build this now?
Yeah, I fly United a lot. No, but the idea was I've spent so much time over the last few years speaking with go-to-market executives across the board that there's this new moment. AI was coming to the fore, and it's so difficult to know what's the right thing to do, what's the right technology to use, what's the right process to go forward. And there's all this demand and pressure to go and actually execute against it. How do you know what's right? You needed something that could help guide you and help you understand that. So, like Polaris, the North Star, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we want to be that guiding light. We want to be that signal in the noise for our customers and help them understand what the next best thing is for their business, because we get to see so much of it and so many different ways of adapting AI.
I started my career in management consulting. And back then, I mean, we're talking about like early thousands. Back
God
then,
bless
I
you.
mean, like, yes. And so I think that there was this idea of the consultant, particularly I mean, like strategic consulting, like of the guy that comes in, tells you what, like, they think you should do and then leaves. But I believe that now we are in a different stage of like what consulting really means and what service means for many companies. And then there is companies like Palantir who have always almost like defined like a new model that they call like forward deployment engineering, where like, you actually build alongside customers. And so I feel that like the perception and the actual work that consultants do has changed quite significantly over the past decade. And so what is that you want your customer to believe about you, helping them solve their problems?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to how we work with our customers, we want to help guide them on it. I think the problem with traditional management consulting is that here's your slide deck and like good luck. And that's not us, right? We're going to help you come up with what those processes are, help you understand that strategy. But we're also going to walk side by side with you and make sure that it's actually implemented and that your people are enabled, whether that's your AI team or that's your flesh and blood team. It doesn't matter. Those things need to be able to work symbiotically together. And we're there to help build out the AI piece of it and make sure that your humans are enabled to be able to partner with that AI to effectively walk forward in whatever your strategy is.
And how is that so? It seems that like AI has been a key driver in thinking about Polaris. And so
100%.
does that mean that like you're not gonna just do RevOps, but like using AI across functions in the companies that you support?
Yeah, so we're using AI in a myriad of ways. Obviously, we use it internally to be able to help deliver work that we're bringing to our customers. But I think more importantly for them, we're helping them architect and engineer AI tooling that's purpose built for their needs. So that way they can focus on getting to whatever that next level is for them, whether it's an AR marker, strategic, Lord willing, someday an IPO. Everyone has this mandate to go out and use it, but again,
Yeah.
very difficult to understand what is the right thing to do. So we've started off with two main offerings, which is an AI readiness audit, helping our customers understand what it means to adopt it from a security perspective. What does that mean from a data perspective? What does that mean from an enablement perspective? And then on the other side, we're executing that with our GTME-as-a-Service product.
Tell us more about that. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about the first part, the foundational component and readiness. We'll go deeper in that. But like, tell me about the last one. What does that
Yeah, I
imply?
think that the GTME role is very interesting, right? It's blowing up, not quite as much as RevOps did in 21 and 22. But by and large, these GTMEs, they're 24 to 30-year-old kids that don't have a ton of business experience, right? They're curious, they're willing to learn the tooling, and they're very interested in experimentation and hypothesis, which is awesome. But from what I've seen and what I've heard from my peers is that it's very difficult for those folks to be able to tie back the technical things that they're building into a business requirement or a business value. And they're highly transient. They're getting paid a ton of money to do a job that didn't exist that long ago. More power to them. But as a company, if I'm thinking about it, I want to de-risk that. So how do I do that? I bring in that level of capability with executive oversight, with architectural oversight, with project management oversight, so that it's all working together for the common good, as opposed to being this thing that's, my former SDR who's now doing experiments for me on the side as a CRO, but maybe he leaves in 3 months because someone just offered him $175,000.
Yeah, very interesting. And so going back on the foundational elements, this is something that we as ScaleStack talk about a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so
And
you and I've talked about a lot over the last few years.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think that we see this, the importance of this, pushing companies to reassess like pain points that they've had for a very long time. Like
Oh,
a
yeah.
simple example about like, oh, my CRM is crap, right? So a couple of years ago was like, okay, yeah, my CRM is crap. I mean, like,
Yeah. It just
what can
is.
I
It's always
do?
going to be that way. We're never
Is
going
that
to deal with it.
right?
Yeah.
But now with AI, it has changed the equation. And so if I feed bad data to AI, whatever that means, it means like, copilots, it means like another tool that we're using to like do certain things. The impact and the outcome of that will be like shittier faster with AI, and that's a problem, no? And so what are like the components of this AI readiness that you touched on with customers?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head, right? You have to have that metadata correct. And if you don't have that normalization of the metadata, not just within your CRM, but across the application layer, you cannot create the appropriate systems of record in order to be able to drive your systems of action.
Mhm.
So you need to augment it from systems of information. And then once that's all been normalized, you can push that down into your data warehouse, right? And now you're working off of a solid foundation where every system understands the things that you're talking about. And now you can drive the right actions and make sure that you're creating the appropriate workflows or outbound cadences or nurture or all these things that can happen once everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet. It makes CS's job a lot easier. The ability for your AM team to have the conversations with your customers about the value that they're actually getting from the platform that they're using that much easier because they actually have the data at their fingertips now and you're able to service it rather up to them in an appropriate way as opposed to people having to go out and find it in a spreadsheet or in a report.
Yeah. And is RevOps usually the entry point then? And I'm
The entry point,
going to tell you
the entry point
for
for
this
which?
AI readiness, assessment.
I think it really depends on the size of the companies that you're working with. If they're large enough and they own budget, sure. Very often you're seeing the entry point here either come in at a CIO, CDO level. You're seeing it come in at a CRO level who's trying to make sure they have what they need in order to drive the business forward. You're also seeing it from a CFO level where they understand the risk and the inherent trap of not getting to the levels of proficiency and efficiency that they need within their organization. You keep hearing of, I mean, just this last week, right? UPS laid off 40,000 people because they say that they've got AI doing a bunch of stuff in the background. They don't need that middle management layer. Amazon just laid off another, 10,000 people because they're
14.
claiming AI is helping them. Oh, is it 14,000? That they claim AI is helping them get there better. How much of that's true, I'm not sure. But when I'm looking at the balance sheet, that's a lot of dollars falling off.
Yeah. I don't know, the numbers, we'll see. Like, it depends on how fast is like AGI coming. And so, maybe
Yeah.
28, 31, we'll see. But I do agree with your assessment that depending on the companies, the conversation may shift to the CIO level and CFO level, even like skipping the CRO.
Mm.
Because of two reasons. The first one is that I think AI is such a horizontal and transformational tool that like the decision of what tech, depending on which area of the company, is often a build versus buy.
Yes.
And so you need a lot of fluency to decide what is that we're building and what is that we're buying.
Yep.
And
And that's wild because before people would always buy. The risk was too high to go out and try to build something custom. But now because of the tools that are available, people are willing to experiment far more with build. And they're getting there faster than they ever did before. So it's really interesting to see how that continues to play out.
yeah, there was an MIT study that was published like this summer. It had like a really silly title about like 95% of AI investments in companies are failing. But the details of the study were actually pretty good. And one thing that the study said is that they observed that the companies partnering with other companies or like, companies like yours or companies like mine achieve better success than just purely going alone, unless you are saying like, oh, we're just experimenting and like, it's early for us, we just want to build something and see like, what sticks in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But even in those situations, like the partnership model was better. And I mean, we see it. I mean, like today, Amazon stock is up, talking about Amazon, because they announced a partnership with OpenAI. So, like, I think companies doing stuff together because there's so much that we still need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even at that level, down to every company, I think that like partnering with others is always, time consuming, but it's also like getting to ROI faster in this situation. And then I definitely see also in our world that I think you have described RevOps are like a honest broker between sales and customer success and finance. And I do believe that that's the role, especially with companies with like a very meaningful and strong RevOps team. But we are observing at companies that the CIO is earning the right to decide certain things that maybe a year ago were like the domain of RevOps.
Tell me more.
Because I think that like in the first year or two, companies have been experimenting a lot with tools and individual productivity stuff. We are at the moment now where like the AI readiness that you say, it's by default something company level. It's not like, oh, let me give you like a tool for like, me to write better emails or like summarize the content of a meeting. It's like, what can we do at the org level? What can we do at the company level?
How do we start getting that data in en masse, right? And then be able to look at the corollaries and what actually makes sense for us.
And so that means that the type of people that you are selling to is quite wide. What have you found like in the first, how long have you been at this now? 6 months? A little bit less.
Not even.
Yeah, not even.
Yeah,
What
it's
what have
crazy how
you
fast it's
found?
blown up.
Yeah, yeah. What have you found like something that like it's repeatable in that motion? What are the problems that you keep like seeing and solving for customers in this initial few months?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I think at the top of funnel, finding very interesting individual data points that matter to a company when they're trying to figure out exactly who should be buying or what is a precursor signal to becoming a company that's in the buying cycle. I think a lot of folks know today when someone's in a buying cycle, right? RFP goes out or there's some trigger hand raised on a website, but how do you find that information ahead of time? What are the techno and firmographic data points that you can pull that other people aren't thinking about? A lot of our customers happen to be vertically integrated SaaS. So they're selling into non-sexy industries that aren't as digitized, which makes it really interesting because there's a lot less friction there when it comes to competition, but there's a lot more friction because these people aren't as digital in their footprint. So trying to go out and find this information becomes far more challenging. Or there's like really specific things that you're looking for, maybe a certain link on a website or a mention of a certain technology on a job post, right? That not everyone's searching for, right? Those things become interesting. On the back end, it's helping companies with their customers. If you've got 7,000, 8,000 customers, it's really hard to go out and schedule every single QBR. It's hard to make sure that you're getting all of the right information to the right stakeholders over there. So systematizing that and making sure that you're getting your customers the things that they need to make sure that they're feeling the value from the technology that they've gotten from you and the service that they're getting from you. I mean, we can go deeper on that, but
No,
we try to
very,
keep it pretty high level.
very,
Yeah.
no, very interesting. You've said like and to prepare for this, I've seen some of your prior stuff. It's something that like it really resonates with me. I always think about how much easier it is to buy in a B2C business as a consumer versus how much more friction there is in B2B.
Mm-hmm.
And, is that something that you want to, help your customers with across the board? How are you translating this like vision? Okay, it should be as simple as is for a consumer to buy consumer products than B2B. Is that something that informs like those top of the funnel and like the technical aspect of it?
100%. We far too often get pulled into this moat of thinking about ourselves and thinking about our targets, our numbers, our quotas, our expectations. And there's not enough of a focus on the customer. Focus on the customer, focus on what they want, focus on the value that they're going to get, on the things that they need to be successful, their story. Does bringing this technology on help them get promoted? Does this help them get to, I don't know, an exit, whatever it might be? Does it get the monkey off their back so that they can stop worrying about a menial day-to-day item, and now they can actually focus on the strategic things that their boss actually wants them to do? If you start thinking about that and thinking about those user stories, then you can start thinking about how to remove the friction. How do you make an Amazon-like experience, right? And that's why Carabiner grew so fast, right? Everything that I had built within that sales motion, that go-to-market motion, was intended to remove friction in the buying process. So how do you lead with expertise? How do you show the customer the right proof points? How do you get the right surround of people within the network to speak with them and get the right referrals or the right client references, all in a very succinct, like, week or less, in order to drive a business as quickly as possible? And people buy the way they
Really,
want to buy in their consumer lives, right? Like, word of mouth, referral, people buy from people they trust. They buy from people that they trust.
I mean, so much interesting stuff. Also for me, for the way we cut across. I see the growth that we have experienced over the past year as 100% a function of, like, let's remove friction in every step. You know, it needs to be very easy to buy. It needs to be very easy to understand. It needs to be very easy to, like, you know, go quickly to the core of, like, what you can help customers with and help them in, like, navigating that. You know, like, at the end of the day, like, you know, B2C businesses help consumers simplify everything. So simplicity is, like, key in B2C, and often in B2B we get involved, as you said, like, you know, we get distracted by, like, you know, other things that had nothing to do with how a customer should experience working with us.
Yeah, and ultimately, it runs all the way through. I think of HubSpot, right? HubSpot's got such a great checkout process, right? It feels like when you're buying something on Amazon, right? You don't even look at the T's and C's half the time, right? I mean, Apple's trained us not to read anything, but you go to check out on HubSpot, it feels like you're on a website and it's like it's a shopping cart. So anything that you can do to remove that friction, whether it's having a data room set up ahead of time that's specifically for that customer, so that hey, this is all of our compliance stuff. I know you're going to need this. Give it to your team now, because if you are interested, get that process started, because we know in a company your size, this typically takes about 2 months. Lead with expertise, pull away the friction.
Yeah. And then you said something also about, like, how you present yourself to customers. I mean, I think that in consumer world, you know, you're not going to watch an ad just to simplify it and buy. No, I mean, yeah, maybe sometimes, but it's multiple points, you know, where you start understanding the value of this brand for you. And so it's multiple touch points. And I see that in B2B as well. So, like, it cannot just be like a sales process, you know, direct sales. It needs to be like, you need to build, like, brand equity. You need to explain the vision, the story, so that people start understanding what you are about.
Yes, sir.
And that's multiple touch points.
That's right. It's that coffee. It's the networking event that you were both at. It's the dinner that you attended. It's the conference that you saw each other at and the conversations you had there. Nothing is simple, but the simple things can be if they are intentional.
Let me switch gears a little bit, and it's a topic that it's dear to me. And I think that with AI, people often translate automation with AI, but I don't think that, you know, it's way more than that. I mean, AI in many ways is changing the way we work.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there are, like, two set of tools. The tools where, like, you really live in them, and, like, you know, daily, you're basically in the tool. And then there are, like, tools that you, quote unquote, set and forget. And those are, like, autonomous tools. What is your vision? First of all, like, this mapping of the market makes sense to you, and it's something that you think about. And then, like, what are, like, maybe good examples of the first and examples of the second?
To take that step back, I think a lot of people think of AI, and generative AI gets so much of the flash right now. But I remember when AI is not new, right? We've had ML for years. One of the last companies I was at before Caribbeater, we had built an ML engine and we were growing really well because of it. As far as the tooling goes, yeah, there are the things that you use day in and day out, and then there are the things that you sort of set and forget, to your point. There's stuff that we've got running. I don't even pay attention, right? I've got a couple people that'll help monitor it from time to time, but anything that we're running on N8N, it just goes, right? That's been set up. It's been well thought out through our buying process, and you're probably not getting a bunch of outbound emails from us, but we're gathering a bunch of information on you so that when we have the right conversations in the right rooms, we're ready for them. I think that's part of the important part, because we want to make it feel organic and not like you're getting spam canned, because outbound is really, really difficult right now. That's why we've indexed so heavily on in-person events. I think it's also one place like AI can't go, at least not yet.
Yeah, that's the same approach that we have in many ways. Like, what we have built is like an enterprise version of N8N, and we aspire to be that autonomous platform that runs in the background. That's why we call it like an autonomous revenue engine. Like, we aspire to be like leveraging AI to remove work off people and remove that work that is typically very manual and maybe time consuming and kind of boring. Like all the foundation. Yeah, I want to do the boring work and not just automation, but make it autonomous so that it runs on itself. And so we should definitely talk for your larger customers using SkillStack instead of N8.
Of course.
But it is a framework that we use a lot. And it's a framework, and I think you have said this in past interviews, that like do the stuff manually first and then
Yes.
automate it.
Yeah, you have to do it manually first.
100% believe that, because then like you see the opportunity. So maybe if you tell me like an example of how you've done this maybe now at Polaris or before, that would be great.
Yeah, a great example, one I'm doing right now, we're helping a company redo territories. And before, people might just throw that into a machine and see what it spits out, right? But if you're a growing company, you've got 3 AEs right now, you're about to have 5, and next year you're trying to go to 12. You actually have to take care and diligence to plan that out, because I don't need 12 territories. I need to figure out 20 territories, and I need to then be able to carve that out all appropriately, whether that's based off vertical or geo. And then I need to do the right smash togethers of those so I can have an appropriate book of business for each of my current AEs to be working with, a rules of engagement that's built out, knowing that when this person gets hired, we put them into the system, trigger happens, they automatically get all these accounts assigned to them, minus any ones that are currently being worked with an open opportunity, right? We give the existing rep like 35, 40 days, whatever it might be, right? All of that needs to be well thought out and built out ahead of time in order to be able to even give a automation or some type of AI the ability to go out and do that, right? So much easier to have an AI go through however many accounts and say, was there an activity within the last 45 days, last 30 days? What are the notes on here? What is the context of that? Should we be handing this over to the new rep, or is this something that the current rep is actually working right now? I don't want my ops team doing that. That's so time consuming and boring. It's necessary.
Yep.
But again, back to the foundational piece, you can only do that if you have clean data in the system, if you have been capturing every customer interaction, if you've been capturing the notes appropriately, whether from your call recording tool of choice, you need all of that. And you need people to be doing their job and being in process and collecting the right metadata. If you don't have it, that entire thing becomes moot. And now you've got an ops team that's being flooded every time there's a new hire to go through and check 300 accounts that are being assigned to the new person or what have you. It's a waste of time. And it doesn't drive the efficiency, because now they're not doing the strategic things that they need to be doing to move the business.
I love that example, because like essentially distributing an equitable book of business across the sales org is such a big process that involves so many steps that if you do it manually once, retrace all of the steps, it will be easier to understand what are the steps where you do need like a human intervention, it's maybe the negotiation between teams and the understanding of what is the total TAM that you should be receiving depending on the size of the territory and all of that. But then it involves a lot of steps that are maybe boring and a lot of like data research that should be automated or made autonomous. And so it's a great example and actually one use case where we help customers a lot with. Now, a couple of things around like the people skills.
Ooh, which ones?
Think that like especially with AI, like what we're seeing is that like there needs to be even more attention on what we want our people to do or
Sure.
ourselves. And
Yeah.
so as like this evolves, this being like AI and how we use AI, what are like the skills that you think are becoming more important and will continue to be important as we get faster and better AI at the company level, at the user level?
That's a great question because I think the answer is going to shift over the next 18 to 24 months. The things that people need to be good at now, prompt engineering, first principles thinking, right? You have to be able to understand what a possible outcome is in order to be able to dictate and explain to the robot what you want. It's not that intuitive yet. You can't give it a bunch of information as far as like a question or a demand without giving it a significant amount of context in order to get there. As they get smarter, as we use them longer, they get more and more context. It's a lot easier to interact with them, but you can only do so for a couple minutes, right? Before they start to hallucinate and or get off track. And then you start all over again. That's why we've gone from having prompts that were this big to prompts that were this big to prompts that were this big, right? I think as AI gets better and we start driving towards more an actual like AI assistant, one that has context, has access to all of our data, is able to go out there and be proactive around the things that it's suggesting to us and helping us think through. I think that's going to be very different, right? Because now I have to have all the right strategic thoughts and I can let it do the day-to-day things for me. I can let it send an email. I can let it send a calendar invite, right? It can build out the baseline of the proposal, right? And for my review. So I think that's where we're going to end up in the not too distant future. But that skill set is wildly different, right? That now you have to be a really high functioning quarterback that understands both the high level and the
Yeah.
nuanced detail within what's going on within your particular business, whatever that is, as if you're an AE or if you're the COO, CFO, CEO. That's a different conversation than where we are today. But I think we're going to get there very quickly.
Last question, maybe around like speed. How, like, maybe building Polaris or even in the engagement that like you are like starting to do with customers, are you putting a premium on speed or like, are you putting a premium on like, building like a system that it's going to work for the long term? I mean, like, there is always like speed quality type of trade-off, no? And so how are you thinking about speed as you
I
build
think it
Polaris?
depends on what the demand is, right? If it's just hey, go build me these simple workflows, that shouldn't take more than, a couple weeks, right? Depending on the amount of context you need to get access to systems, right? Those are the things that slow you down. It's not the actual building. The building happens so quick, you could probably do that in a couple
Yeah.
days, if not hours, right? But it's all the human stuff that gets in the way, all the compliance things that get in the way. On the other side, if it's something complex that's going to affect a very sizable organization and it's going to touch multiple departments within that organization, you want to take the time to think it out, commit it to paper, document everything, go through multiple iterations with the right stakeholders, make sure that it's all set, and then go build. The build, again, doesn't have to take forever. Like we're doing a Salesforce implementation right now for a decent sized org, and the building part itself is pretty straightforward, but it's committing to the metadata, right? What are the right fields? What are the custom objects? What are the join objects? How does all of that interact? What are the integrations? What data do we need from what integrations? How do we pull that together? How are we pulling in the right revenue information for bookings versus actualized revenue versus what they're showing from an accrual model?
Yeah.
Usage based, right? So pulling that in, the right tiering, overages, I don't know, there's all these different components that get pulled together. And the discovery and the requirements gathering is actually the long part. And that requires people talking to people over and over and over and over again. And then the building part, you do that at night and it's easy. But
I think that's a great framework. And it's also like probably a good trace for the skills that are needed. I mean, like the alignment on strategy and like, logics and, all of that first part, like do spend time, do iterate, do ask a ton of questions and make sure that you have understood the answers and spend the time, because then the build is going to be very speedy. And speed, disproportionately matters in business, but I think that you want to spend time in that first step. Cliff, this
I
was
think too
great.
often people want to get to a result and
and
they
skip
don't
through. Yeah.
they don't take the time to think about what that end result actually means. They have an idea, an abstract, but until you actually start talking through all the different components of it, you end up with something that you don't necessarily want, and then nobody's happy.
Yeah, and then rework needs to happen and all of that. Awesome, man. This was great. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone. This was Revenue Engine Masters with Cliff Simon, Polaris CEO and founder. To the next time.
All right. Thanks, Elliot.